Alright, hello and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about why you can't perfect yourself into having a perfect life. And this is something that I talk about pretty often because I feel like it is one of the most pervasive things that we as a species are doing, and especially in the self-help, spirituality, personal growth world. We may have a tendency to be seeking perfecting ourselves in the hopes that if we just get ourselves to a place where we are perfect in some way, on some level, through some modality, that this will end our suffering. That this will make it so that we never have struggle, that we never suffer, that we never go to dark places, that we never have bad things happen to us ever again. And I also realize that for a lot of us, we don't think that we're doing this. We don't think we're trying to get to perfection. We don't think we're trying to perfect ourselves. And we don't think, if I perfect myself, I will never have pain again. Like, we don't have these conscious thoughts because it's more of a subconscious messaging from our self-help, personal growth, spirituality world that is driving us to seek this and to think that this is possible and all of this without us really being consciously aware that this is what we're doing, okay? And what most of us are going to realize in terms of our actual seeing ourselves in this pattern of trying to perfect ourselves and hoping that if we perfect ourselves, we will have a perfect life, is in our self-hate and our shame, blame, and guilt patterns. Okay, so again, we're not going to be sitting there thinking, if I perfect myself, I will never have pain again. And I totally identify with what Ali is talking about today because I have those thoughts. We're not going to be thinking of it this way. Right? We're not going to be thinking, if I perfect myself, I will never have pain again. Rather, it's going to be that moment-to-moment basis that incident to incident to incident, where we are shaming, blaming, and guilting ourselves and saying, if I had only been different, if I could only have been better, if I could just fix this thing about myself, that wouldn't have happened to me, that painful thing wouldn't have occurred, I could have avoided that, I could have seen that coming, that was my fault and I shouldn't have been that way and I shouldn't have done that. We're going to see that this pattern is more playing out on the opposite side of how we beat ourselves up and how we shame and blame and guilt ourselves, and in the resistance we have to being compassionate with ourselves. Because a lot of the time, again, we're going to notice that it's not that we think that we're pursuing perfection, but we are noticing that we have a very hard time being on our own side and being nice to ourselves when we make a mistake or when something goes wrong or when we're in pain. And the idea of being compassionate with ourselves is actually really scary. And it's something that we feel really, really averse to because we are afraid that if we let ourselves off the hook, if we stop trying to perfect ourselves, if we stop trying to shame, blame, and guilt ourselves into being these perfect people that we should be, that we are never going to get out of pain. Yeah? And we think, because we subconsciously believe that to perfect ourselves will mean to never have pain again. So we don't want to be nice to ourselves. We don't want to have compassion. We don't want to be gentle. We don't want to be curious and open. We don't want to be on our own sides because we're afraid in doing that, we're letting go of the pursuit of perfection. We're letting go of trying to become this perfect being. We're letting ourselves off the hook. We're admitting that we are where we are. We're accepting that we have flaws and we always will. And in that, we think we're saying, and therefore I will suffer forever and I will never feel better. Okay? And there's also this feeling of that can be present of that I'm never going to get better if I don't get to perfect. That there isn't such thing as better or improvements that make a significant difference to the quality of my life and how I feel. but rather it's this thing of like, there's going to be a before and after. Like, I'm going to be shitty, and then I'm going to do my self-help thing, I'm going to do my spirituality thing, I'm going to do whatever I need to do, and then I'm going to get to the other side, and on the other side it's going to be perfect. I'm never going to be in pain again, I'm never going to hurt again, everything's going to work out. And we don't have a concept of progression, and we don't have a concept of things getting better over time, and that actually having an effect. And therefore, again, we are afraid to let go of trying to perfect ourselves. Okay, so now the next thing that I really want to talk about is the reason that, okay, I'm going to start kind of with what we're seeing in the world and how this idea is sold to us. And then I'll move back into why this idea of perfecting ourselves, equaling I will never be in pain again, is so attractive to us. And again, something that we might even just like subconsciously be believing because of how we were programmed and because of what we experienced in our childhoods. Okay? So if we take a look at the self-help, spirituality, personal growth world, we can definitely acknowledge and validate that a lot of teachers out there are saying that if you do my technique, if you do my spiritual work, if you do this self-improvement stuff, if you whatever, thing I'm selling or whatever I'm selling as being the self-help technique of the day, that if you do my thing and if you follow my program and you join my group and you do whatever, that you will get to a place where maybe bad things still happen and hard things still happen and whatnot occurs, but you will be in a place where you have ascended so much, you have transformed so much, you have healed so much, you've gotten rid of your trauma so much that it doesn't bother you anymore, or that you're more equanimous, or that you can handle it. And you can have this abiding sense of peace and this abiding sense of love and this abiding sense of being okay, even when hard things are happening. Okay? So it's not necessarily that all teachers are making this promise that if you do their technique or if you become spiritual in their way or do their personal growth work or whatever, that your life will be perfect. But they tend to say that you will get to a place where things don't hurt anymore, or the pain is way less, or you've transcended your emotions in some way, or you will just be more stable and life will just be so much more, enjoyable, that it won't hurt so much anymore. And they slip that in, I think, in order to make it sound like they're not promising you that everything's going to be perfect. But I think for a lot of us, again, we have such a subconscious desire to get to a place where we don't feel pain anymore and where we don't suffer anymore and where we've fixed our problems and we get to that after place and then we arrive there and then we never go back again, that a lot of us don't really hear that message. Like, we don't really take it in, like we hear it and we get it. But we're sort of hoping that it's not true and that we will get to this after place that makes it so that we're perfectly transcended and everything's amazing, right? So if we look at a lot of spiritual work, we know that a lot of spiritual teachers preach this kind of enlightenment or this transcendence of if we get good enough at feeling our emotions, or if we get good enough at seeing that everything is perfect and exactly how it should be, or if we meditate enough or we do enough yoga, we're gonna get to a place where we have abiding joy and we have abiding peace. So no matter what's happening to us, we get to this place where we just are constantly able to be in like high vibes and not feel pain and not be upset and not be dragged down by the things of the world. And that's a big part of the promise of spiritual work, is one day you are going to transcend essentially the human condition and get to a place where you don't feel bad anymore. And that is a big part of the kind of like blame, shame, and guilt that can come along with a lot of spiritual teachings, in that we start to feel like we're failing, or we're not trying hard enough, or we feel guilty or not good enough in our spiritual practices, because we still get angry and we still get sad and we still have overwhelming emotions, or we're not always able to be even keel, right? And this turns into a new thing where we're constantly trying to micromanage ourselves, and we're trying to be on top of our emotions, and we're trying to be on top of our thoughts, and we're trying to be on top of ourselves, so that we're constantly trying to do our spiritual practice so that we don't feel that way. And we get into this place where we start to like really resist our feelings, and we resist our anger, and we resist our sadness, and we resist our resistance, because we think, no, I'm supposed to be getting to this place where I've transcended that. And I'm supposed to be getting to a place where I feel okay about anything, and I feel like everything is perfect and exactly how it should be. And if I'm not feeling that way, I'm failing, right? So then this becomes the new dog chasing its own tail, the never-ending navel gazing of, now we're constantly on top of ourselves and feeling like we need to do more spiritual practice and more of this and more of that and more of this and more of that, because we're not getting to a place where we feel perfect all the time. And rather than looking at the technique or looking at the promises and saying, maybe this isn't real, and maybe these tools are great and they help me and all that stuff, but maybe this idea that I'm supposed to be transcended isn't the right thing. Instead of looking at that, we hold on to the hope that if I do this more, if I do this right, if I just keep trying and practicing and doing this harder, I'm eventually going to get to that transcended place. And the reason that I'm not there is not because the technique doesn't work. It's not because that's not possible. It's because I'm not doing it good enough. It's because I'm not doing it hard enough. It's because I still have trauma. It's because I still have blocks. And then this feeds into that never-ending loop of seminars and buying things and going to retreats and feeling like you need the next level and the next level and the next level and the next level, because you're not getting to that place that you're expecting you're supposed to get, which is, I'm supposed to get to a place where I'm equanimous all the time, where I have peace all the time, where I have that abiding capacity to have capacity for everything. And I don't go to that dark place anymore. I don't get angry anymore. I don't get sad anymore. And any amount of me not doing that is a sign that I'm not doing it good enough, right? So that becomes the narrative. That becomes the loop. I'm not doing it good enough, and that is why I have not reached transcendence. And then it's the same thing with the natural health world a lot of the time, the wellness world. There's these messages that if you just take enough responsibility for your health, if you do enough health practices, if you do your practices long enough, and if you do them perfectly enough, you can prevent all illness, you can heal anything that might be wrong with you. And if you're not healing it, and if you're not preventing it, again, there's always going to be room for, what are you doing wrong? What are you not doing enough of? How are you not following the protocol perfectly? Maybe you need to do more of the protocol. Maybe you need a different protocol. Maybe you need to do the next extreme thing. And again, this can very easily lead to that slippery slope of more and more and more extreme practices, more and more extreme health and diet restrictions, and doing this and doing that and adding this and adding that, continually thinking that you're not reaching this place of transcendence. Not because that's not possible, but because you must be missing something. You must be doing something wrong. That if there's still any amount of ill health or dis-ease in your body at all, that there's still more for you to cleanse out, there's still more for you to heal, there's still more for you to build, and that, again, that perfect health is available if you just do more of it, okay? Same thing in our love relationships. This is huge, especially in the polarity doctrine and in all the people who teach that they can help you have perfect relationships. It's again this deep narrative of if you perfect yourself, if you do enough inner work, if you learn to communicate properly, if you heal all your childhood wounds, if you find your perfect match, if you perfect the way that you are in your relationships on some level, you will find your perfect match and you will have this beautiful relationship that's never hard and never sticky, or at least you know exactly how to handle it, and you can guarantee that it's going to be perfect forever, and it's going to be safe, and it's going to be fun, and it's going to be adventurous, and it's going to fit into this kind of perfect box because you fit yourself into the perfect box, right? And then we look at the law of attraction and any teaching around the law of attraction. And again, the message is like very clear in that one, that if anything has happened to you, it's happening to you because of you. It's happening to you because you have a vibration, or you have had thoughts, or you have made choices, or you've taken action that caused for these bad things to happen or caused for the good things to happen. And it is on you, again, to perfect yourself, to get to a place where you've perfected your thoughts, you've perfected your vibration. You are constantly looking for, what is the thing that I did, or that I thought, or that was in my past, or that was in my karma, or that whatever, that caused me to experience the thing that I experienced? And how can I fix that in myself so that that never happens again, right? So again, if we take a step back and we look, we are going to see. And one more thing is, I want to highlight that a lot of the time the way people sell us their programs, people sell us their self-help, spirituality, personal growth, is through a lot of testimonials of people saying, right, before I had the same problem as you. I was unhappy in love, I was sick, I was sad, I was depressed, I was anxious all the time, whatever it is that is our pain point. We're going to see that reflected in the testimonial. I had that thing before joining this course, before doing this work. And then I did the work and I perfected myself and I made myself better and I did all this inner work. And now I don't have that anymore. Now my life is radically transformed. It's totally different. I don't struggle with that anymore. And I am proof positive that this thing can make your life radically different and perfect because I've done it and I'm transcended. And the person who's selling the thing will usually promise that that's what happened to them. That's why they're selling it, right? Like I talk about Gabrielle Bernstein a lot, is that she's kind of continually on this loop of selling that there is this perfect thing, that she was, struggling with depression or struggling with addiction or struggling with whatever. And she was just like you and she was just where you were. And then she found this practice or she found this thing or she found this way of believing or whatever it was that she did. And now she doesn't have that anymore. Now she's transcended. She's on the other side. She doesn't feel like that anymore. And I will teach you the technique that I use to get there. And then 6 months later, she comes out with a new vulnerable share that's pain point, just like you, new solution, new course, new things she sells, and round and round and round it goes of the never-ending navel gazing, okay? And again, if we look at most of our self-help, spirituality, and personal growth, it's all focused on the individual. It's all focused on us improving and perfecting our individual selves, with the promise that if we do, we will get to this other side where we don't deal with our problems anymore, where we have fixed whatever it is that was bothering us, we've fixed it forever, and we're never in pain again. And again, they don't say it in those words because that would make it obvious. I think that would trigger us into being like, really? You're promising me that I'm never going to have pain again? But they say it in a storytelling way. They say it in a testimonial way. They say it in a, I used to be there and now I'm not there anymore way. So again, it's subliminally, subconsciously planting this message that if you perfect your individual self, you will then have a perfect life. Okay. And even from there, we can look at the way that we look at our influencers and our spiritual teachers and the people we see online and all this stuff. And just how harsh and critical we tend to be of anyone who is sharing any tool or technique, in the sense that we are looking for any amount of imperfection, any amount that they might still be human behind the veil, any amount that they might still be struggling or not having perfect success the way that they're saying they're having perfect success. And we very harshly criticize and judge that. We reject it really hard. We look at it as a moral failing on their part when spiritual teachers, self-help gurus, all of these people come out with their struggle. And when they come out with their struggle in a way that, like, I'm still struggling with this, I'm still going through this, versus, of course, we don't judge them when they come out with the 2 weeks ago I was in this really dark place and now I'm transcended and it's all fixed and it's all perfect and I'll tell you how to do it. Right? We're fine with that. But if we see people struggling and we see people saying, I have a perfect life, and we can kind of tell that they don't, we immediately, it makes them lose all credibility. It makes us feel like scorched earth, abandon them, we're not going to talk to them, we're not going to look at them ever again, they're horrible, they're lying, find someone else who's perfected, right? And we look for the perfect people. We look for the perfected people. And again, we're okay with the vulnerable share so long as they're over it already. Even if it was literally last week I was struggling with this, even though last week you were telling me that everything was amazing and your life was perfect and transcended. We don't think about that, right? It's all this big web where we're just continually looking for that perfection. We're looking for someone to be transcended because we're hoping that if we find that person, we can follow that person, and then we too will perfect ourselves and become transcended. And again, it's all that individual, if I perfect myself, if I take control over the one thing that I think I have complete control over, which is myself, I can perfect that, and then I can get to a place where my whole life is perfect and I'm never in pain again, and I protect myself from all pain, and I can give myself all pleasure. Okay, so now why is this message something that is so attractive to us? Even when we know on a level, an intellectual level, it doesn't make any sense and it's not real. And even when, and why is it something that is sold to us subliminally instead of being said straight out? And why are we attracted to it? Okay, so again, we have to remember that our very first experiences of life, our very first experiences of this lived reality, what it is to be a human being who's alive on the planet right now, our very first experience of that was to be in the hands of our caretakers, in the hands of these people who to us at the time appeared to have perfect capacity, perfect knowledge, perfect control over everything. It appeared to us that our caregivers were fully capable of taking all of our pain away and providing everything we needed for us. And that's how we saw them. We literally saw them as gods who were perfectly capable at all times to do for us anything that we needed. And it would have appeared to us, because the one thing we had control over when we were children was not circumstances. We couldn't understand ourselves and what we needed and how the world works. We didn't have any kind of autonomy. The only thing we had control over was our individual behavior. The only thing we had control over in determining the outcomes of our reality, in our attempt to start to have some autonomy, was if I control my behavior enough, if I control my behavior to make it so that it matches what my caregivers expect of me, what they want of me, what they expect of me, so that they will respond to me by giving me what I want and taking away the things that I don't want. That is my power. That is how I control the world around me. By figuring out what the people who are in control want, figuring out what makes them pull away, figuring out what makes them draw close, figuring out what seems to make them respond to me in this way or that way, and augmenting my behavior to be what I am perceiving as a child they want me to be and they want me to do, so that they will give me what I want and take away all the things that I don't want. That's how we perceived the world. That perfect provision, perfect love, perfect having what we wanted was available. We perceived it was possible through our caregivers loving us and understanding us and providing for us enough. And we perceived that if we just behaved correctly, that we could have complete control over how they reacted and responded to us. It really looked like to us that everything our caregivers did in terms of how they reacted to us and how they responded to us, how they provided for us, how they didn't provide for us, all of this was because of us on some level. And even if we started to realize that our caregivers were suffering or that they were weak or that they didn't have the resources, if we started to realize that before we were intellectually, emotionally stable enough to be able to recognize that, that was going to cause a whole lot of fear and trauma in us. This idea that our caregivers were weak or flawed or didn't have the capacity, that would usually have turned into either us turning into feeling hopeless on a level, feeling like life was never going to be okay and we were never going to be all right because we were learning that these people that we depended on for everything weren't capable of everything and were flawed. And seeing that and realizing that, for a lot of us, if we realized that a little bit too young, would have been incredibly scary. And then, so we either would have turned hopeless, or a lot of us learned how to be kind of codependent in that. We learned how to say, okay, well, maybe I can help them. Maybe I can be there for them. Maybe I can support them. Maybe I can be better for them. And in so doing, we were trying to get to that perfect, right? If I'm perfect for them, if I show up for them, if I'm their counselor, if I'm their perfect helper, if I'm their whatever it is that I need to be for them to fill in the gaps for where they're not okay, then I will have the perfect life that I want. Then they will be able to perfectly provide for me. If I become the thing that they're missing, if I fix myself enough to be what they don't have, then eventually they will be able to provide for me in all the ways that I need them to provide for me. If we perceived our caregivers pulling away from us when we were sick or when we were loud or when we were needy or when we were whatever, even if that had nothing to do with us, right? If our caregivers were just overwhelmed from their day at work, or they didn't know how to help us, they didn't actually have the capacity to take our pain away or to give us what we wanted, a lot of us have to realize that we didn't perceive it that way. We didn't perceive caregivers just can't. We didn't perceive caregivers are doing something not because of me, but because of their own life and their own experience, and it doesn't have anything to do with me. We were only perceiving they're responding to me because of me. And this is where we learned, for most of us, what parts of ourselves we needed to hate and fear and reject. Because anytime our caregivers couldn't show up for us, anytime they were antagonistic to us, anytime we felt unsafe in their presence, we were going to start to look for, what did I just do? And what is wrong with me? And what was the cause from inside myself that made them do that? What did I lack? What did I do wrong? What was shameful about me? What was bad about me? And that's when we start to develop these existential relationships with these parts of ourselves that we perceive to be the reason our caregivers are not providing for us, and they're not helping us, and they're not giving us what we want, or they're antagonizing us, or they're shaming us, or they're rejecting us, or whatever pain we're experiencing. We were going to start to look for, what was it in me that made that happen? Okay, we were very self-centered, and we perceived that everything was because of us, and that, again, was our first understanding and awareness of how life worked. We didn't have the awareness and the understanding that I'm a human who has needs, and these needs are met, like, right, I'm hungry, so I can go to the kitchen and get food. Our perception, our experience was, I don't feel good, I make a noise, I do something, caregivers perceive me, caregivers understand what's going on, caregivers give me food, I feel better, right? So we learned that there was this middleman between us and getting what we wanted, and that was other people. And that middleman meant that we needed to be approved of, and we needed to perfect ourselves in order to be approved of and understood by the people around us, and then they would provide for us. So a lot of us, again, are now in our adulthoods working with this subconscious program. It's not conscious, we're not thinking it through. The subconscious program that I am in pain because I did something wrong. I am in pain because I'm not living up to expectation. And I just need to figure out what the rules are. I need to find the protocol. I need to find the thing that if I get myself to measure up to that, finally I will get that love and that approval that I've always wanted. And in getting that love and approval that I've always wanted, I will get perfect love, perfect safety, perfect provision, and never have pain again. Because that's how it appeared to be in our childhoods. It appeared to be that if we had just lived up to the expectation of our caregivers, if we had just figured out what they wanted and figured out what they needed and become that person, that we would then forever and ever get our needs met, because they would always understand us, they would always give us what we wanted and what we needed, and then we would never be in pain again. It appeared to us that that perfect life was possible through changing ourselves enough to measure up to whatever the expectation was, and that if we did that, we would be perfectly provided for. And now we're projecting that out onto the universe, or to God, or to our lovers, or to our bosses, or to money, or to our bodies. We're looking for the perfect protocol. We're looking for what we can do to find the perfect rules, that if we follow the rules perfectly, we will finally get to that safe place where life stops being painful and we get perfect provision and never have pain again. And again, I think that for all of us, this is subconscious. This is why, for a lot of us, when we start, like I say, on our spiritual practice, when we start in our health journeys, when we're in these self-help, personal growth, spirituality things, we're not thinking, what are the results I'm getting from the actual practices? We're not thinking, how do I actually feel when I engage in this discipline? We're not thinking, how do I actually feel when I eat this diet? What are the actual results that I'm getting when I'm doing this meditation practice or doing this self-improvement thing? We're thinking, am I doing it right? Am I doing it perfectly? If I'm not getting the results that I want, if I'm not getting the transcendence, if I'm not getting the healing, if I'm not getting to this place that I want to be getting to, we're not looking at, okay, how is the technique failing? What's wrong with the teaching? Where might there be gaps in what I'm being told? Where might this be a tool that's helpful rather than being the ultimate answer that's going to change everything? Rather, we automatically go to, what am I doing wrong? How am I not doing it enough? What's wrong with me? Why am I not doing it perfect? Where am I failing? And oftentimes, the teachers and the guides will say the same thing. You're not getting results because you're not doing it enough. You're not doing it right. You're not doing it perfect. And so we literally live in this world right now where people can sell us tools and techniques and spiritual stuff that literally fails to get us what it's promising us over and over and over and over and over again. It absolutely does not help us transcend to get to a place of perfect health, help us transcend to get to a place of perfect spirituality. Like, we see this especially in the health world, of people doing these diets and these cleanses and these protocols over and over and over again. These juice fasts and water fasts and herbal supplement regimes and all of this stuff. And getting sicker, getting weaker, feeling worse. And rather than being like, okay, this doesn't work. This isn't how it should be. This isn't the perfect thing that I hoped that it would be. People say, what am I doing wrong? I'm not doing it enough. I just need to try harder. I need to do it again. I need to do it more extreme. Like, we're literally being sold things that have never once worked, that do not work for us, that do not deliver on their promise. And rather than that being a deterrent and us saying, oh, this is a sign that this doesn't work and I shouldn't do this, it's used as a selling tactic to sell you more of it. Like, do you see how when we're in this self-blame thing, that people can literally sell you shit that doesn't work over and 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 over again? And actually, the more it fails, the better it is for the person who's selling it to you's bottom line. Because the more they can then say, well, you didn't do it enough. You didn't do it good enough. It was you who failed the protocol. Because there's always going to be a reason we can look to and say, okay, well, you didn't do this perfectly perfect. You didn't exactly do this. You didn't measure up in this little way. You slipped up on this, because we're all human. Right? No matter how disciplined we are, no matter how committed we are, none of us are ever going to follow any protocol perfectly. It's never going to happen, because we're humans and life happens. So there's always going to be that, well, what did you do wrong? What did you not do good enough? What did you not live up to? That's the reason it didn't work. So re-buy in. Double down harder. If you just come back and try it again and do it perfect this time, you will get your results. Do you see what I'm saying? Because we are so conditioned to believe from the very beginning of our lives that if we just follow a protocol perfectly, if we find the protocol, we follow it perfectly, we do it perfectly, it's going to give us perfect results. And the only reason something wouldn't work is not because it doesn't work, is not because it isn't right, but it's because we failed on some level. Yeah? That's the selling point. They can just keep selling us and selling us and selling us and selling us on things that have never worked and that will never work to bring perfect transcendence. And we will continue to believe that it was because of us not doing it perfectly, not trying hard enough, not being disciplined enough. And we will keep buying and keep buying and keep buying and keep getting more and more self-obsessed, because that's the loop. And it's reinforced by these people. Yeah, you did it wrong. The power is in you, right? And again, the message is very rarely, yeah, it's your fault, you did it wrong, right? The way they sell it is, the power is in you. You have all you need. Don't be a victim. If you take your power back, if you take responsibility for yourself, if you become a good person, if you're truly moral and if you're truly right and if you're truly taking responsibility for yourself, you can transcend. You can have perfection. You can make your life exactly how it's supposed to be. Don't blame anyone. Don't look to the world outside of you. It's you. You're the one, right? And that sounds really empowering. We want to believe that. I'm in complete control. Like, right? This is especially huge in the law of attraction teachings. I'm in complete control. I'm in complete control of my mind. I'm in complete control of my vibration. I have control over my vortex. And so anything bad that's happening, anything that's wrong, anything that's painful, anything that's harmful, I can fix it by fixing myself. And they keep spreading this message over and over and over again, so that it continues to reinforce what we believed as children. It continues to send home that message that if you just follow the protocol perfectly, you will get the perfect thing. And any pain that happens, we now turn it back in, navel gaze, what did I do wrong? What was wrong with my vibration? And we buy back in and we buy back in. We have people who go to these law of attraction cruises and conferences for decades, and their lives never change. And they continually think, no, I have the secret. Literally the secret, right? It's called that. I have the secret. I have the answer. And the only reason it's not working is because I haven't perfected it yet. And they will do it for decades and never think, maybe this isn't it. People, like I said, will do health things for years, not heal, get worse, and continue to believe that they've found their guru and that they're doing the right thing. And they just need to do it more. They just need to do it harder. Because we're always going to be able to find a flaw in how we did it, that we will then be able to say, well, that's the reason it didn't work. It was my fault. And we are truly believing we can get to a place where we can transcend life. We can get to perfection if we perfect ourselves. We found the rules. We just have to learn how to follow them perfectly. And we can do that until the end of time. Because it makes sense to our childhood psychology. Now, on the self-love path, this path that I teach, what we are going to come to is the adult perspective. And the adult perspective is one where we realize life is always going to happen. That we are never going to get to a place of transcendence and perfection, where we never have negative emotions again, where we never face hard things again, where we never, indulge in our coping mechanisms or our numbing or our scapegoat or our self-sabotage, where we find perfect love and we know how to perfectly relate, or we have perfect finances, or we have perfect health. That the self-love path is not about trying to find perfection through figuring out what the rules are and then following the rules perfectly. Because even with this work, there can be a tendency for people to say, okay, well, if I just learn to love myself perfectly, right? If I just learn to have perfect compassion for myself, and I learn to be on my own side, and I stop beating myself up, and I get rid of all my shame and guilt, I will have a perfect life. I will be transcended. I will never have pain again because I'm perfectly loving myself. And my message is always, here's the truth. None of us are ever going to perfectly love ourselves. None of us are ever going to do the self-love path perfectly. I teach this, I don't do it perfect. There are days where I beat myself up. There are days where I don't have compassion for myself. There are days where I struggle and I don't know what my answers are, right? Especially being chronically ill and having the traumas that I have. There are days where it gets really scary sometimes and it gets really hard and I am not transcended. And what I can say is that this path has given me the understanding, number one, that I am not the complete arbiter of my life. That none of us, none of us chose the circumstances of our birth. None of us chose our caregivers. None of us chose the traumas that we were going to go through, the hard things we were going to face, the conditioning we were going to get. None of us chose our nature, the way that we naturally are, and how that does or doesn't fit in to the systems that we exist in. None of us created or chose the systems we're living in. So here's where we start to have this adult perspective that is expanded. That our reality is not simply happening because of us. We are a part of a collective. We are a part of a whole. We are a part of systems that deeply affect our experience, that in certain ways we have no control over. And accepting that we had the experiences we had, that they affected us how they did, that we have the disposition that we have, and that we live in a world where we are not in perfect control, is really challenging. Because in accepting those things, we are accepting that there is some pain we cannot avoid. That there are some traumas that might take a really, really, really long time for us to process and heal. That there are some things that happen to us that have dramatically affected how we feel and the outcomes of our lives and the way that we perceive the world, and that we didn't choose that. And we don't have control over that. And we start to be able to understand that perfect doesn't not exist because we aren't following the rules perfectly. We start to accept that perfect doesn't exist. This is what I think is the hardest part about the self-love path, is getting to this adult perspective where we are willing to let go of the idea of perfect heaven on earth. Where we are willing to look and see that that is what we were striving for, that we wanted to go back to a perfect childhood that never existed, and that we've been trying to create that through trying to perfect ourselves for most of our lives. And realizing that at the end of the day, we have some power. We have some capacity to make things better. That there definitely are things out there, tools out there, that do work to make things better. That we can make improvements in our life, slowly and over time. That the more we show up with compassion and curiosity for who we are and what we need, within the context of the reality we actually live in, And when we're constantly doing that weighing of where do I have control, where can I make things better, where do I not have control, where is this not my fault, where do I need to ask for help, where do I need community, where is this a systems thing, where is this a self thing, where we're constantly working that, that's where we're going to find the most empowerment we have. But letting go of this idea that we can get to perfection if we perfect ourselves, I think is one of the hardest things we're ever going to do. But that's what the true perspective of life actually is. And when we can get there, when we can get to, okay, I'm not going to perfect myself to a perfect life. Because a perfect life doesn't exist. Because my life isn't just because of me. I live in systems. I live in a context. I have a history. I've been affected by so many things. This isn't just me. When we can start to understand that, that's when we can start to find our real power over what we do have control over, and where we can make progress towards better, where we can start to invest in community, and we can stop navel-gazing in places where the problem isn't the need for more self-help and more self-improvement and more spirituality, but like being activists for a change in the way that we do things systemically. Learning to reach out for support when we need it, right? Like this is, again, why I offer one-on-one coaching and why I offer the mystery school. Because it's not all about doing it by ourselves. We step out of this black and white thinking and we start to look for tools rather than things to do perfectly so that I will transcend. And then we start to be able to assess the tools we're using based on how they actually affect us versus saying, am I doing it good enough or am I not doing it good enough? Okay? This is how we get out of that. What am I doing wrong? How am I failing? Self-blame, shame, and guilt every time we're in pain. Every time something doesn't work. Every time something doesn't lead to perfection. This, what did I just do wrong? How did I fail? How am I not good enough? Is an obfuscation of real reality. When we're constantly feeling like we just didn't measure up, that's a sign that we're in the childhood perspective. We're not in real reality. When we feel shame, blame, and guilt, when we have physical symptoms, when we have emotions, when hard things happen to us, when we automatically go to what did I just do wrong, we're in the childhood perspective. There's a difference between what role did I play in that, or what can I learn from this, or where was my power in that. That's a thing that we can do. But when we're in, what's wrong with me? I'm shameful, guilty, and shitty that this thing happened to me. And I just need to find the rules and live up to the rules better. That's when we know we're stuck in the childhood perspective. We want to come into the adult perspective, which says, life is always going to be happening. So where is my power in this situation? Where are the tools I know I can use to help me get through this situation? How can I best support myself with what I know and what I have right now? Is there something for me to learn about myself or reality? We can have that empowered perspective. And we want to be looking for Where was this not because of me? Where was this not my fault? Where is this systems? Where is this bigger than me? So that we can recognize, again, that we are living in a context. So we can stop being sold these wellness, spirituality, personal growth, self-help things that are over and over and over again promising us transcendence. And we keep buying and buying and buying. And ignoring systems, ignoring true cause, going deeper and deeper and deeper into our shame and blame and guilt, finding it harder and harder and harder to have compassion for ourselves. Because we are really truly believing that if we have compassion for ourselves, that we're then letting ourselves off the hook. And if we let ourselves off the hook, that we will stop pursuing perfection. And if we stop pursuing perfection, we will never get out of pain. On the self-love path, we start to recognize that when we are in pain, that is when we need love and compassion the most. That the more we can make ourselves safe when we're in pain versus rejecting ourselves and looking for what I did wrong and how I'm bad and shameful, and the more we can say, okay, whoa, what hurt about that? What actually happened? What were the systems involved? What do I need to feel supported right now? To the best of my ability. That's when, again, we're going to start to be able to understand more about what we actually need and how we can actually help ourselves find better. We step out of the childhood perspective of, if I just follow the rules perfectly, I'm finally going to get a perfect life, to I'm always going to be learning something. There's always going to be a next thing to step into. There's always going to be a challenge I didn't expect. I'm never going to have it all perfectly figured out. I'm never going to do it all perfectly. But I can learn. And there can be better. And the more I can show up for myself with that perfect love and compassion, to the degree that I am able, the more I'm going to open myself up to the real reality that goes beyond, if I just perfect myself, everything will be fixed, right? Because at the end of the day, the real scary thing is that life is more complicated than that. On the self-love path, we come to the revelation that even if we were perfectly loved and perfectly accepted by ourselves or others, that this isn't going to make all pain go away. Because life is always going to be happening and there's always going to be complication. And we cannot perfect ourselves enough to have a perfect life because we're not in complete control. And it's a huge letdown. And this is why we want to believe in all these other things. It's why we want to find the perfect diet. It's why we want to find the perfect spirituality. It's why we want to find the perfect partner. Because we're just hoping that if I just find the perfect thing and do it perfectly, I will finally stop suffering. And that's innocent, and of course we want that. And it plays into that childhood idea that the only reason we didn't get that perfect life was because we didn't behave correctly. That caregivers could have done it for us and they didn't because we didn't do it right. Even if we realized that they weren't capable, we still would have perceived, okay, well, if I help them perfectly, if I support them perfectly, if I'm there for them perfectly, they will then be able to give me my perfect life. That's where that comes from. And then most spirituality, self-help, and personal growth is selling that message back to us. And then society continues to tell you, if you are not experiencing the life you want, what are you doing wrong? How are you not measuring up? How are you not good enough? What's not good about you? Rage baiting, and then distracting and stimulating, so that we never look at just systems, complexity, where we have power right now, where we can develop tools to help us process our emotions, where we can develop tools to help us reach out to the people who are able to help us when we need help. Right? We get coaching, we do these things in order to get tools. And we learn that perfection doesn't exist, but better does. better exists through the expansion out of trying to perfect ourselves into the revelation that the more we just show up for what reality actually is in all of its complexity, the more we figure out where our power is, and then the more we learn how to just process and be with and be in the pain we can't change and get rid of. And we learn how to stop resisting that so much. And we stop blaming ourselves for it and thinking this is my fault on some level. And we learn how to just get through those hard times. And we realize that life is just going to be like this. We can't perfect ourselves enough to have a perfect life. You are not in complete control of everything that happens to you. You have some control. And being nice to yourself is the fastest way to figure out where your control is. So if there's resistance to loving yourself, just please know that that's normal and natural. Because the real fear is if I'm nice to myself, I won't perfect myself. And if I don't perfect myself, I'll never get out of pain. And we have to start to be able to recognize that and combat it with, okay, if I'm nice to myself, I'm going to realize where these things aren't my fault and I'm not the cause. And it maybe is scary because then it makes me feel like I don't have complete control. But it will then help me to figure out where I actually do have control instead of micromanaging myself for the rest of my life in ways that will never lead to better. Okay, this is about learning how to become a true problem solver. Where do I actually have power? And where do I not? And how do I find my balance within that? Okay? Okay. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully that was clarifying. Hopefully you can start to recognize these patterns in how things are sold to you and in your shame and your blame and your guilt and all of that stuff. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down below. You want one-on-one coaching, you can contact me through my contact form or through perceptiontrainers@gmail.com. Join the mystery school. And I don't promise you perfection. I just promise you better. And that's all. So thank you for being here. You are already good enough, one step at a time. Okay? Thanks.